and say welcome, everybody. Good to have you all here with us. There may be one or two people joining us as we go on in the next few minutes, but welcome to our Conscious Conversations for May, and welcome especially to Reverend Professor June Boyce Tilman. It's lovely to have you here with us, June. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. Now I'm going to just remember the format for everybody, just to let you know what's happening today. So there we have it, a welcome at 10:30, and then we have a short group alignment, which Jenny is going to do in a moment. And then we have June talking about Hildegard of Bingen. And then after June's first talk, we have the breakout rooms, and then a short comfort break, and then the second talk, which is about community church, and I'd be interested to find out about that. And then conscious conversations in breakout rooms again, and then the whole group back together, and then a closing intention at the end. So that's our morning, and I'm going to hand over to Jenny for a moment as we have a group alignment. Over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. So for our centering group alignment, the candle is lit. As we prepare to come into alignment with one another, physically distant, yet unified in the here and now. Be still, be present. Become aware of the consciousness of the group as together we reach out to support and encourage one another in our time together. Thank you, Tom.
And so we come together today to form a group consciousness as we meet, thinking about these issues that June is going to introduce to us. And Jane is now going to give a little introduction to June, and then we'll launch June on her first talk.
Well, June is one of the most interesting people I know. I think you could give her any topic and she would have something intelligent and informed to say about it. She is Professor Emerita of Applied Music at Winchester University and an extraordinary professor at Northwest University, South Africa. She has written many hymns and songs, and she has been awarded the MBE for her work. Recently, she's been making music using recordings of plants or stones and other natural objects. But we're not looking at music today. We particularly wanted to hear from June, as she works as a priest in an Anglican church in southeast London, while holding a deep reverence for and theological understanding of the earth, holding the two together in a multicultural environment. So she'll be sharing with us about Hildegard of Bingen first, and then community church involving earth elements and other practices. So over to you, June.
The way I'm going to present this is to tell you the story of Hildegard to start with. Some of you may have seen this before, and it's a bit shortened from what I used to do. And then I'm going to talk about her theology of the earth and the elements. So first of all, I'm going to present Hildegard, and I'm going to put this on to show you that I'm going to become Hildegard for you and introduce you to her story. I am Hildegard. I know the cost of keeping silent, and I know the cost of speaking out. Hear my story. Perhaps you know me as Hildegard of Bingen, but it was several miles from Bingen that I was born, in the Nahe Valley in Germany in the year of our Lord 1098. Do you know the Rhineland? I expect some of you do. It is the most beautiful place, moist and green and fruitful. The rolling hills stretch as far as the eye can see, crowned here and there with rocky crags and tall watchtowers which seem to reach to the sky. Beneath them, the neat fields and tidy villages give ample sustenance for humankind and their beasts. And through it all flows the mighty river Rhine, bringing growth and fruitfulness to the land and a means of sustenance for all creatures, and also a means of transport for all who live there. They call it now, I believe, the fatherland. But for me, it will always be mother. For the earth is our mother. She is the mother of all because she contains within herself all the seeds of all. The earth contains all moisture, all verdancy, all germinating power. All creation comes from it. And yet it contains not only the raw material of humankind, but also the substance of the incarnation of God's own Son. Being the 10th child, I was tithed to God and sent at the age of 8 to live with Jutta on the side of the Abbey of Disibodenberg. From Jutta, I learned so much of everyday things, of spinning and of weaving, but also of the Holy Spirit, which flows like sap through our veins, bringing growth and fruitfulness. From my earliest childhood, God revealed God's self to me in various ways, sometimes in words, sometimes in visions, sometimes in images. But always he shows himself in the splendor of the natural world. But I learned also to see the corruption of state and church, the violation of the natural world, and I knew anger as well as joy. Yet ever within me grew the pressure to speak out. But how could I, a woman, make my voice heard? Who would listen to me? who would hear my words learn not from any human tutor. I consulted my spiritual directors, people I was accustomed to respect and indeed to obey. They told me my role was to tend the needs of my community and to pray ever silently. How could I then have recognized within myself the burning torment spoken of by the prophets when the word of God burns in the heart and aches in the bones? But I kept silent. And yet, in the 41st year of my life's course, I was taken up in a vision, and in it I beheld the dazzling light. And in the dazzling light, a voice spoke to me, saying, "Dust of dust, ash of ash, tell and write what you see and what you hear." And behold, I stood up and I set my hand to writing. The words poured out of me in a torrent, a great outpouring of God's Spirit, his Debar, and I no longer felt beaten down. I started to write my first book. I called it Scivias, Knowing the Ways. It was to take me 10 years to complete. I entered into correspondence with many of the leaders of the day, among them Bernard of Clairvaux and the Emperor Barbarossa. And contrary to my previous fears and timidity, I was heard. By this time, Jutta had died, and I had been elected magistra, or abbess, you might say, of our small community of women, and we were growing all the time. But the monks of St. Disibode had expanded too, taking up all the available land for their farms and their animals. Abbot Cuno was implacable. How can you imagine the arguments and the counter-arguments and the endless frustration of not being heard? Eventually, we just packed up our things and left, taking our dowries with us, and went to the edge of the Rhine on a hill that I dedicated to my dear St. Rupert. We built on the hill, and I myself supervised the building. We even had piped water. Perhaps I remembered the trips to the well and the frozen mornings breaking the ice on the washing trough. But more, I think that Heavenly Father does not delight in our bodily discomfort, especially when it is self-inflicted. It has been said that the body is at war with the soul, but how can that be? He made us as whole bodies, and our souls can only find expression through the actions of our bodies. Indeed, I am persuaded that when body and soul act together in mutual agreement, they receive the highest reward of mutual joy. On the Rupertsberg, my sisters and I explored new ways to worship God, sometimes wearing coloured robes and golden crowns, as befits the brides of Christ. Not always, I may say, with ecclesiastical approval. I myself set my hand to writing letters, writing books, 10 books on many subjects: medicine, theology, the lives of the I spoke of God's justice. I encouraged church and state to excise corruption and work for the good of all creation. For the Holy Father had approved of me. He sent a commission to investigate me, and they found me competent and authentic. And through it and in it is always the music. For music expresses most clearly the soul's desire for God and restores the unity of creation as the Creator first made it. Yet in the last year of my life, the music was silenced. You see, we'd buried in the grounds of our convent a man who'd been excommunicated as a revolutionary, but he had confessed before he died, and he was entitled to rest in hallowed ground. I, though that I was old and ill, went out and removed all traces of the grave so that it could not be desecrated. For I fear the justice of God, more than the justice of men. The prelates of Mainz did not agree with me. They excommunicated us, which included not being able to sing the office. It was a time of great grief and heavy sadness. But after 8 months, I wrote to them saying that those who silence the music of God on earth will have no part in the song of the angels in heaven. The interdict was lifted, and the music goes on. I died in the year 1179. It's difficult to remember. For the words and the songs that I uttered came from no human source. God moves where God will, and not at the mercy of any human creature. And I am ever in fear and trembling, and I ever doubt my own capacities. Yet I lift my hands to God, that I may be carried, as a feather is carried, on the breath of the wind. I did die in 1179, but I do not think that death has silenced me. Some of you today may hear my voice. I was 81 years old when I had died, and I had spoken out for half my life, and I had kept silent for half my life. Perhaps that is the right balance. Receiving and giving out, in and out, like breathing, like the breath of God. Well, there she is. And I'm going to move to placing her in her age and showing where her theology of the earth fitted in her time. She's often regarded as being before her time, but in fact, I'm going to show you that in many ways she was very much part of her time and a woman of her time, as well as being very much bigger perhaps in her time. Her pictures, often she draws a frame and then the picture goes outside the frame as well. But she is also part of her time, and that's what we're going to look at now. So hoping that you can see that screen, and okay, and I'm hoping everybody can see that. Is
Yes,
that right?
that's fine.
Good. Yeah. Okay, and that's the plan, Hildegard in the context of her life and some of the bits of her theology that are connected with the earth. Here she is in her convent with Volmar there with his scribe, writing down her visionary experiences. He was told to just write them down and got told off if he modified them in any way. You see the fire coming in through her head, showing the visions arriving. She's scratching on a pad, which we don't quite know, whether sketching and so on. And behind her is probably Richardis of Stada, who was one of her significant nuns and who left the convent to be abbess of her own convent, and so on. And probably possibly was a very great singer. That's the Reason Codex, which is stored it's actually in the library near the convent. And we're going to look first of all at what she called viriditas. She's often claimed as having created the term viriditas. There are about 2 references to it before from distant manuscripts, but often translated as the greening power or vitality or enverduration, which runs through all of Hildegard's thinking. It includes the vibrancy and energy of all creation and was perhaps born out of her experience of the lush green environment of the Rhineland. It is very, very green because there's quite often a mist hanging over it for a lot of the time. So it's very verdant. And she writes of the earth and the greenness and the nurturing. So this is her writing in one of her medicines on the earthworm is very hot. It grows in the same viridity in which grasses begin to sprout. It grows in that noisy greenness, and because of its clean nature, it has no bones. It is good and useful like other useful things, such as cinnamon. Earth has moisture in it, which is contained in something like veins, so it does not flow out. When the rain is about to fall from the air, this moisture feeds the coming rain, which will fill its veins. The earthworms understand this replenishing of the earth's veins and come forth. So you can see that this view of the earthworm is very different from the current laboratory, where it's cut up in order to investigate it. She sees it very much in relation with the air, with the moisture, and being very useful with like such things as cinnamon. No tree blooms without greening power. No stone even is without moisture. No creature is without its own power. That is the power of the viridity, of the viriditas flowing through everything. That's actually a picture of the current Hildegard Abbey, where you can see the vines growing in the foreground. And she sees God as making the whole of creation in right relationship. And this is her vision at the angels. All these armies were singing with marvelous voices. And what they were saying is God wonderfully formed and ordered his creation. So everything is in right relationship. And her healing is based on the healing which was prevalent, the view of the world which was prevalent in the Middle Ages. And although we look at her visions, but we can see that some of the medical books, you can see the drawing on the left there, some of her visions are very close to those drawings. That's a drawing of the human body. And on the right, some of the remedies, cream, and the bottom are indigestion cakes made to help with indigestion for people. The medieval view of medicine was based on Hippocrates, who was brought alive in the Middle Ages by Galen and so on. The Hippocrates, which we name the Hippocratic Oath from, but it's a very different view of medicine from the way we're operating today. It was based on the four humours. The Greek, medieval, and Renaissance, the traditional four elements form the basis of a theory of medicine and later psychological typology known as the four humours. Each of the humours were associated with various correspondences, particular physical and mental characteristics, which Ising took up in his theory of personality, and would moreover be combined for more complex personality types. The result is a system that provides a quite elaborate classification of types of personality. And this is really the doctrine of the humours set out. You have an element, which I'm moving from right to left, which is earth. The nature of it is cold and dry. The organ in the body with which it's associated is the spleen. And the temper of the person, the temperament, is melancholic. And the humour is black bile. Now, it's that phenomenon called black bile, which was largely responsible for discrediting the doctor of humours, which is what happened in the so-called Enlightenment, because nobody quite knows what that was. So you have the earth connected with all of that. You've got water, whose nature is cold and wet, associated with the lungs, with the phlegmatic personality and phlegm. The air is warm and wet, associated with the head, the sanguine nature and the blood. And the fire is warm and dry, associated with the gallbladder, the choleric personality, and yellow bile, the humour in the body. So all of those need to be balanced in the body of human beings and of the natural world, including the earthworm, is made of combinations of the humour, temperament, organ, nature, and element. They're normally in balance, and they need to be in balance. Too much or not enough of a humour causes disease. The cure is by rebalancing the humours in the person, and you have to diagnose using the humours and the imbalance. So fever is associated with hot and dry, for example. So the fire element has gone out of balance. And the cure is to counterbalance it with cold and wet. And there you see her writing of this, many powers in it, various types of soil by their colour, which may be green, white, black, or red, and each has a different blended balance of moisture and dryness, warmth and coldness that she calls sweat and moisture and juice. She uses sweat quite a lot. It's very possible that in her day, in the archaeology of Germany in particular, we've found things which look very much like sweat lodges. And she does use the word sweating God's goodness, because that's the sweat, the coming in, or getting rid of some of the elements. It's part of rebalancing and so on. But she says we sweat God's goodness. And it's possible that the sauna of the Finland was pushed up from the center of Europe simply into Finland, and was once upon a time much more common in the center of Europe, and so on. There are the four humours again in a picture showing how they should all be balanced. It's not unlike Ayurvedic medicine with the notion of the balancing that you see there set out there. It's a balanced system of medicine. A person's blood and humours are affected by the time of the moon's movement, so it's very much associated with the moon. Specifically, the air moves to good or bad weather following the moon, and corresponding to them, the blood, the humours flow within the person, and the water conservation affects human behaviour. So when you're diagnosing an illness or an imbalance, you have not only to look at the person and the balance within them, but what the weather's like and what the earth is like. So if you are a dry person, an earth person, and it's raining a lot, you won't be in your natural element. So you'll possibly be imbalanced. So I wonder how many of our GPs today look at the weather as well as the person in front of them, because we respond in different ways to the environment. The environment and us are intimately related. This is one of her lovely pieces of writing that she's the first woman or first anybody to write about the growth of the baby and so on. And when she writes about science, and they call her the first scientist, although her attitude to science is very different from our treatment of the environment as inanimate. Then as God wills it and as he arranged it, the breath of God comes within and enlivens this form. This is the fetus. Without the mother knowing it, the breath of life comes like a strong, warm wind, like a wind that blows loudly against a wall and streams and fastens itself to every joint, and so on. And you can see that she shows the limbs opening up. And the bit that I think is really lovely, the soul wanders around it like a caterpillar down at the bottom there. For the living wind that is the soul enters into this form, as was mentioned above, according to the will of Almighty God, strengthens it, makes it capable of life, wanders around within it like a caterpillar that spins silk, from which it becomes covered and closed in as within a house. Thus it penetrates the entire form of the child with its breath, just as an entire house will be illuminated by fire at its centre. And the remedies, you can see the remedies that she's recommending there. Wine is both the blood of the earth and is in the earth as blood is in human beings. It has a certain commonality with human blood, and for that reason, like a water wheel, funnels its warmth directly out of the bladder into the marrow and sets it into an extremely burning heat, so that the marrow then bestows upon the blood a hot striving of desire. For that reason, a person who wants to drink some strong, noble wine should mix it with water. So, which people are beginning to realize now is quite a good idea. But that notion, you see, you're constantly rebalancing what you put in the body to keep the body in balance. The place of music is crucial in this. It's the essence of the universe. I'm going to flick through that. Expresses the unity of God. There you see the way it's written down, the neumes that she uses. And the hymn brings together the body and soul, the words being the body and the music being the soul. This is the theology that is drawn out of the doctrine of humours. And so we have this image, as you can see, not unlike some of the medical images, but the human being is set in a natural world. You can see the winds blowing in, the water, the fire, and the earth, all present in that image. And of course, it's set as the body of God. So the earth is the body of God. God is not remote from the earth. The earth is the body of God. And that is an impressive image of how we are not separate from the earth. We are intimately bound up with the earth. And that image is a beautiful one of that. It's always got the earth, air, fire, and water from which we're made. Shows God the Father who bears the great wheel of creation in his breast, supported, embraced by the figure of flaming love. In the middle of the universal wheel stands a human being projecting beyond the tiny earth into the realms of universal forces. The human figure seems to hold the universal network in its hands, thus accepting humanity's task of creative commitment to the world. And there's another one. This hasn't got the figure of God, but there is the cycle. You see people ploughing and so on, the cycle of the movement of the earth and the way that we engage with that. Shows the cosmos as a network of interrelationships within the energy of God portrayed as an enclosing fire, and so on. And here we have the mutuality of creation. Just as the creator loves the creation, so also does the creation love the creator. Creation was designed to be beautifully enriched, to be lavished, to be richly endowed with the love of the creator. The whole world has been hugged by this kiss. And there we see the center figure could be Christ, or it could be the human being. Many people use that particular vision as a mandala. You see that the human figure in the middle, the top of the head is opened, the fontanelle, into the love and the vitality of the divine. And she links this with wisdom in her thinking. And she has a thinking of wisdom split into 3 virtues, which nearly gives you a female trinity: love, humility, and peace. And there's caritas, the central one of it. So strengthening love is blooming in everything, not just human beings. At her most excellent in the deeps and the rising stars, and the most fascinating heart of all things, because she has embraced the highest sovereign in peace. That's the play of the powers where she works it out. Well, I'm not going to do this bit. She is a visionary, and she has visions from the age of 3. She sees things by means of my soul, for I do not hear with my outer ears, nor by the reasonings of my heart, nor do I perceive by any collation of my 5 senses, but directly into my soul. I never fall into weakness of ecstasy, but have visions while awake, both at day and night. There she is, receiving the visions that she's seen before. And that's earthy theology she's got. And in many ways, we've medicalized the visionary experience and made it unacceptable, whereas for her, it was the revelation of the divine. And that links her with people like William Blake, the visionary. Say, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is infinite. And she is one of the great visionaries. And of course, acknowledged by the Pope, which is quite remarkable for those days, who finds her competent and authentic. And so many people in the so-called New Age are drawing on her, but by drawing on her are drawing on the doctrine of humours, which she's drawing on to make a theology of. So she links in her writing the doctrine of the humours with a theology. She brings theology and the humours together. So we see the New Age, as many of you are familiar, trying to rebalance the dominant system, and so on. And thank you very much for your attention. I've introduced you, I hope, to a little of Hildegard's theology and how it is both expanded by her in bringing together theology and medicine, but also she's part of her time, and that the doctrine of humours at the Enlightenment became discredited. And we will see how that can go on in the next talk in our attitude to the natural world and the way that we respond to it now. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, June. That was absolutely fascinating, and a lovely insight into Hildegard of Bingen. We're going to go into our conscious conversations now in breakout rooms. I think most of you have probably done this before, so you know the format. So our question to our starter thought for this, which I'll just bring up on the screen for a moment so you can see what we're going to be thinking about, is how did we lose the relationship with the earth that they had in the Middle Ages, and how can we regain it? How did we lose the relationship with the earth they had in the Middle Ages, and how can we regain it? So lots to discuss there. And I'm going to hand over to Bill to put us into breakout groups. We're all back again. I'm going to take a short break. So I'll bring up the share screen. We'll be 10 minutes. So we'll come back together at 11:35. So see you all then. Get yourselves a cup of tea or whatever. See you later. We're going now to our second talk, which June is going to give to us about the community church in which she is involved. So looking forward to hearing about this and the greening of it. So June, I'm going to hand straight over to you for our second talk. Thank you.
Just getting slideshow running. I'm really talking about earth theology. That's what I'm talking about, and how far that can enter our church and what ways we might bring that earth theology alive. As many people have said, we lost it. We're trying to regain it in some way. And so that's what I'm going to talk about, earth theology. And I know that people are talking about having services outside, and I think that's the notion. There are a number of community church elements which are doing that. Would recommend looking at the website of the Cathedral of Truro, for example. It has a very interesting development in this area. Anyway, here we go with the theology of the earth and how our theology might be transformed. So let us pray and listen to this prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. That is straight from the Henry VIII's Book of Common Prayer. And I hope you notice that in the middle, it is not on earth as it is in heaven. It is in earth as it is in heaven. And that was the original prayer book. And only in the later prayer book did it become on earth. If we could say the Lord's Prayer within earth, that would transform people's thinking alone, that we're not living on the earth as if we're resting on it temporarily and about to fly off it. We are living in the earth. We are a strand in the earth. And we are going to have to change profoundly the values that our services and liturgies have maintained. The crucial choice illuminated by the past involves the courage to make painful decisions about values. Which of the values that formerly served a society well can continue to be maintained under new changed circumstances? Which of those treasured values must instead be jettisoned and replaced by different approaches? There is a lovely account of a minister who wanted to preach on the theology of the earth, who stood up and said, I cannot find a single hymn that embodies what I want to say. For today, we're going to sit silent and listen to the organ. And many of our hymns have embraced a dangerous theology. And of course, the hymn takes it very close, into much more deeply into ourselves than the spoken word. So the song of the earth, and that's what we're going to work through there. You see that lovely image of Christ embracing the earth and so on. Well, the earth is actually has a huge variety of sounds around it, and increasingly we're not listening to it. We're keeping them out wherever we can. We're creating soundproof studios. We're trying to keep churches just with one thing going on rather than allowing the pigeons to crow in the roof and all sorts of things like that. Anthrophony, the sounds made by human beings, are increasingly overcoming the sounds of the earth, which are being rediscovered in various ways like this, and so on. It appalls me that so many people now are running with headphones on. Why are you running through a common with your headphones on and missing the sound of the wind and all of that? We're not even listening to the sounds that the earth is making, let alone having any deeper relationship with the earth. We're filling it with human sounds. And this wonderful statement, the indigenous people, do you know that trees talk? Well, they do. They talk to each other and they'll talk to you if you listen. Trouble is, white people don't listen. They never listen to the Indians, so I don't suppose they'll listen to other voices in nature. But I have learned a lot from trees, sometimes about the weather, sometimes about animals, sometimes about the Great Spirit. I think the Western people who come into an Indian environment and attempt to preach take along their own set of categories and use it to deal with Indian people they meet. Anthropologists summarizing what they find in the Indian tradition, always calling us animists, and that view is accepted by a great many people in the field of religion. We are put in a cultural evolutionary framework, and then we are supposed to move from animism to some great abstract conception of one God. Science describes things at a level of abstraction by leaving out of account a whole range of properties that they have: colour, beauty, consciousness. I shall come back to that because in many ways that writing by George Tinker is really critiques Western theology and the way it's gone, really. Not only gone, but also tried to destroy those cultures which see it very differently, deliberately destroying it. Some of you will know that New Zealand has given groundbreaking law granting personhood status to the Wanganui River. The river is a living whole from the mountains to the sea, incorporating all its physical and metaphysical elements. And that was part of a settlement with the Wanganui iwi, comprising the Maori from a number of tribes who've long viewed the river as a living force. I think at the moment, there's quite a lot on the BBC that I think it's the Oos that's now, they're claiming a justice statement. Certainly in Bangladesh, rivers have the same rights as people. So the notion of being able to declare the rights of the natural world, as well as the rights of human beings, is growing across the world. And that will change a great deal of our values that we've had. If we've got the notion of the unity of force within the natural world has really come right through human history. Space is not empty. There are primordial sounds in vibratory codes, which we can, and we'll come back to this here, some, but not others. Ether was very much part of the ancient Greek, was the quintessential of the gods and ran through all of the Greek matter. It was then replaced in Christianity by the notion of the Holy Spirit. And then we have Descartes coming along with energies, substances like electromagnetic and gravitational forces, developed then by Newton. And then the notion that we have now in the quantum world of vibrations being the thing that links us together, which if I were talking about music, I would see would develop much more as the quantum, the 0 point energy of where we are now. So maybe the quantum, the vibrating universe, is a new manifestation of an understanding of the Holy Spirit. Human beings have been unbelievably arrogant in relation to the natural world. A human and the seagull, each of them equipped to perceive the world in ways that I am not. The world supports the irreconcilable perceptions of us all, fish, beetles, birds, and people. The world supports all of these experiences simultaneously, and for each experiencer exclusively, shows that none of us has, nor could have, even in principle, anything more than a minutely partial experience of the world. And we've been unbelievably presumptuous, thinking we have the one and most important and most informed version of the natural world. It's a lie. And this book by Ed Young, and I'm going to read you the opening of the book because it is quite remarkable. I'm cutting bits of it out, but I think it's quite remarkable. So follow me in yet another story. Imagine an elephant in the room. This elephant is not the proverbial weighty issue, but an actual weighty mammal. Imagine the room is spacious enough to accommodate it. Make it a school gym. Now imagine a mouse has scurried in too. A robin hops alongside it. An owl perches on an overhead beam. A bat hangs upside down from the ceiling. A rattlesnake slithers along the floor. A spider has spun a web in the corner. A mosquito buzzes through the air. A bumblebee sits in a spotted sunflower. Finally, in the midst of this increasingly crowded hypothetical space, add a human being. Let's call her Rebecca. She's sighted, curious, and thankfully fond of animals. Don't worry about how she gets herself into this mess. Never mind what all these animals are doing in a gym. Consider instead how Rebecca and the rest of this menagerie might perceive one another. The elephant raises its trunk like a periscope. The rattlesnake flicks out its tongue, and the mosquito cuts through the air with its antennae. All three are smelling the space around them, taking in the floating scents. The elephant sniffs nothing of note. The rattlesnake detects the trail of the mouse and coils its body in an ambush. The mosquito smells the alluring carbon dioxide on Rebecca's breath and the aroma of her skin. It lands on her arm, ready for a meal, but before it can bite, she swats it away, and her slap disturbs the mouse. It squeaks in alarm at a pitch that is audible to the bat, but too high for the elephant to hear. The elephant, meanwhile, unleashes a deep, thunderous rumble, too low pitched for the mouse's ear as all the bats, but felt by the vibration-sensitive belly of the rattlesnake. Rebecca, who is oblivious to both the ultrasonic mouse squeaks and the infrasonic elephant rumbles, listens instead to the robin, which is singing at frequencies better suited to her ears. But her hearing is too slow to pick out all the complexity that the bird encodes within its tune. The robin's chest looks red to Rebecca, but not to the elephant, whose eyes are limited to shades of blue and yellow. The bumblebee can't see red either, but it is sensitive to the ultraviolet hues that lie beyond the opposite end of the rainbow. The sunflower it sits on has at its center an ultraviolet bullseye, which grabs the attention of both the bird and the bee. The bullseye is invisible to Rebecca, who thinks the flower is only yellow. Her eyes are sharpest in the room, unlike the elephant or the bee. She can spot the small spider sitting upon the web, but she stops seeing much of anything when the lights go out. And then we see in the story how they manage in the dark. And this is the end of the account. As the bat feeds, the robin feels a similar attraction that most of the animals can't sense at all. The days are growing colder and it's time to migrate to warmer southern climes. Even within the enclosed gym, the robin can feel the Earth's magnetic field, and guided by its internal compass, it points due south and escapes through a window. It leaves behind one elephant, one bat, one bumblebee, one rattlesnake, one slightly ruffled owl, one extremely fortunate mouse, and one Rebecca. These 7 creatures share the same physical space, but experience it in wildly and wondrously different ways. The same is true for the billions of other animal species on the planet and the countless individuals within those species. Earth teems with sights and textures, sounds and vibrations, smell and taste, electric and magnetic fields. But every animal, including the human being, can only tap into a small fraction of reality's fullness. Each is enclosed within its own unique sensory bubble, perceiving but a tiny sliver of an immense world. It's a very beautiful account, and it shows how pretentious human beings have in claiming superior knowledge to the rest of the world. We only perceive a sliver of an immense world. And there are the world sounds, all the sounds that are being produced, anthrophony. You see all the stuff that we're producing as human beings, transportation sounds, mechanical sounds, and non-mechanical sounds, such as music and speech. But there's also geophony, which is the sound of the wind and the water, and then there's biophony, from a variety of animals and so on. Can we hear those and then start to perceive? And there's the growth of anthrophony over the last 50 years, the sounds that we've increasingly obliterated listening to the earth at all. And this is what Jane was referring to at the beginning. This is a machine that I've been using. This is the sound of the plants. You see in front of the left a little digital machine which is connected to the plant behind it and turns the magnetic energy or the water or both into sounds. And this is what that particular plant sounds like. If I can, sorry, if I can make it play, there we are. You see on the right-hand side there, the little clips which go onto the plants in order to pick up the internal energy of the plant. Here's another one that we've recorded. This is one small yew tree. And there are various plants that we've, two other improvisers and I spend 3 hours every month improvising with various plants in the garden. You see the variety of plants that we've done. She's talking, there are two machines, one from America called Plant Wave, and the one that we're using called The Sound of the Plants, which is coming from Damanhur in Italy. This is one of the people associated with Damanhur, a synchronistic connection for me with Hildegard and St. Francis, who to me were alive during a spiritual renaissance, such as I believe we're in the midst of today. I can imagine the walks they had through the gardens, experiencing flowers, trees, flying birds, and peaceful animals in the presence of universal nature, and a place and time and silent space where words were not spoken, but the presence of the divine source was vibrant and colours were vibrant and the air and energy were alive in resonance with peaceful, harmonious state of living. To me, her music is much like the music from music of the plants technology I was able to produce with my works. And it's in the developing area of panpsychism, which is the notion of an energy within everything, very much like Hildegard's Viriditas. Cosmology, astrophysics, evolutionary biology, molecular biology, and ecology. Very much also fostered by the process thought in the hands of philosophers, by seeing all entities as having subjectivity and agency, and that also being rocks and stones as well, having subjectivity and agency, which is what traditional theology has denied. The Reformation did have a fairly pernicious effect in establishing, really, the high position of the human being in a dangerous hierarchy. This led to the pernicious individualism of contemporary secular culture, and it's individualism that has wiped that out. It's even cut us off from other human beings, let alone from the worms and the roots of the trees and so on. And this notion, and of course now secularized in the form of humanism, making human beings the center. And what we have at the moment is the growth of soil science, pedology, the science of soil genesis, classification and distribution, sort of thing we saw in Hildegard with different colors of soils. Edaphology, the influence soils have on all living things and on the use humans make of the soil and the land more generally. But since the Reformation, theology has lost touch with a meaningful awareness of the soil or the earth, and actually influence the wider society. So don't get dirty. But this is dirty theology. Don't get muddy. All of those sorts of statements we see in ordinary everyday life. So the images of God and the earth of traditional theology have not helped us. The Sistine Chapel is a disaster. And you see all those other images of God flying above, touching, but not being engaged with the earth. All of it's pretty grim. And all those images are a disaster for earth theology. And here we see God as remote from it all, plough the fields and scattered, but it is fed and watered by God's almighty hand. He sends the snow in winter, but he's sending it from a distance, and so on and so forth, rather than being engaged in the very essence of it. I think what happened when I went, this is really an account of my visit to Delphi and the Oracle, which I thought would be wonderful, and I found it a disaster. In Delphi, the original shrine was to the earth, and the earth was filled with vines and trees and all of that, and it was a great center of the earth. And Gaia, when I'm telling the story from Gaia's point of view, she said, I handed my power over to Zeus. It was a disaster. She hands her power over to the male gods. And what happens in Delphi is that we start to build up from the earth. We build pillars and towers and things because the gods are up high, whereas in the earth tradition, they're down low. They're in the earth and so on. And so the initial move to the heavens, which you see in all those gods sitting up on top of a mountain, was with the Romans and the Greeks, building upwards and inventing the pillar. You didn't need pillars if you had trees, because the trees grew up anyway. You didn't need stone pillars to build. And then when the Greek and Roman theology emerges into the Christian theology, of course, what you've got then, as you see in the bottom there, are churches with spires. So everything moves from being on the ground and the earth and all of that, and it points up to the sky with towers. So Christian theology becomes an extension of those gods. Now it's only one God, but sitting up in the sky and trying to reach up. And so we admire, Salisbury Cathedral with this massive spire. We haven't got churches that are sort of, we have, of course, Winchester Cathedral with the flood in the basement, but there aren't many of them, and so on. So the move from a Gaian philosophy into a Greek and Roman set of gods sitting on a cloud was natural to move towards the church, where God is up and not down. So we're asking, this is Sally McFaig's significant work, whether one way to re-mythologize the gospel for our time might not be through the metaphor of the world as God's body rather than the king's realm. So not having a king in the sky ruling over it. The world is viewed, as Hildegard saw it, of God's body, and that body includes more than just Christians and more than just human beings. The monarchical models of God the King have served us very badly. It's marginalized the material world, including the body and the environment. We've tended to see all our energy being focused at the top of our heads and so on. And then we've actually then almost pathologized the bottom parts of our bodies and so on. God is not in a far off place, a king looking down, but here as a visible presence. The world is the bodily presence, a sacrament of the God. So we flew away from the soil. Middle English dirt meaning drit meaning excrement encouraged the negative connotations of living soil that we now associate with dirt, deadness, disease, and contamination. We even avoid even touching the earth with our bare hands. And yet, if you look there, one sort of, 10 million bacteria in a handful of soil, 1,000 nematodes, random proportion, 250 worms, scores of kilometers of microscopic roots, hundreds of insects, unknown billions of viruses, and so on. That's what a handful of soil has got in it, and yet we've not treated it in that way. So images of God and King and separate sit uneasily that disputes the body, soul, flesh, spirit, non-living. God is in fact an all-encompassing reality, not then that reality is to be experienced and through actual lives and biological ornaments. So that move has been in many ways a huge problem for the church. And I love Charles Birch writing about it. The Creed, for example, which says virtually that God made the world, sent his son to redeem the world, and then his son goes back to heaven and will come again to judge the world. Now, that is so antiquated in terms of its view of the world. scientific view, it's very hard to see how anything good can come of it. And I don't think much good has come from it. Creation is still going on. That creation is not something that just God does, but creation is a relationship between the creativity of God and the creativity of humans. Otherwise, you believe in a sort of predestined world. In addition to objectivity, there is subjectivity, right down to the ultimate bits and pieces like quarks and atoms. And that was a hymn I wrote. Deep in creation's heart and energy, calls to us but leaves us free. Dance with that universal energy, celebrate life's mystery. So getting away even from the word God, which has so many preconceptions and the way the church has handled it. This abstraction of the earth is perhaps a very tricky. The soil is literally the ground of being for the worms. The philosopher of Martin Heidegger and the theologian Tillich, God as the ground of being, forgetting that the German Grund means soil and earth. And Catherine Keller writes in Western philosophy and theology have reduced the earthiness of ground, a source of life, to mere abstract, onto theological ideas about origin and absolute foundation, deterritorialize themselves. Earth is too dirty for revelation. Soil is never a matter of a divine epiphany. This process actually happened in about the 2nd century CE, where people, Jerome in particular, started to interpret the Bible as allegorical rather than as material. So we have that discussion of the Song of Songs not being a marvelous book of the earth, which it is, but actually a figurative result for an abstract relationship between the soul and the divine. And that tropological and allegorical reading of the text of the Bible then went on to the way in which we use symbols, use these symbols not as actual material symbols, but as abstractions. There's a tropological allegorical reading. I've done a whole chapter on the Song of Solomon, which we've completely misread as allegorical rather than actually soil. And here we see it. Come, ye thankful people, come, raise a song. All is safely governed. It looks as if it's going to be pretty earthy. And then by verse 2, we've got to all the world is God's own field, fruit of praise, wheat and tares together sown. And it becomes the harvest of souls rather than the harvest of the earth. I love Francis Hole. He signs himself Francis Hole, TNS, temporarily not soil. Because whether we like it or not, whatever we may think of heaven, we will go into the earth in some shape or form, either as a body or as ash. So we are only temporary, not soil. We're made from the soil and we return to the soil. Part of us does. So in that soil, we are earthlings, earth creatures, groundlings, and soiled creatures. And for Ash Wednesday, when I can, I will say, from earth we come and to earth we return. And that makes much more sense than reducing the earth simply to ash. And doesn't it sound much better when we say from earth we come and to earth we shall return? It becomes much more exciting and so on. And we have Monbiot talking about the soil, which we once saw as a homogeneous mass, is composed of structures within structures. Earthworms, roots, and fungi create clumps of soil glued together with fibers and sticky chemicals, and so on. This process builds an ever more complex architecture, pores and passages through which water, oxygen, and nutrients can pass. Soil is like a wasp nest or a beaver dam. It's an extraordinary model for human culture. Of how vast millions of creatures manage to coexist and nurture one another and so on, and marvelous. Human beings may separate things into as many paths as we wish, separating spirit from flesh, sacred from secular, church and world, but we should not be surprised when God does not recognize the distinctions we make between the two. Earth is so thick with divine possibility, it is a wonder we can walk on anywhere without cracking our shins on altars. I like that, cracking our shins on altars. So, why is heaven up and hell down? Since the Reformation, Western thinking has little meaningful awareness of positive appreciation of the soil or earth. Why haven't we got badger angels? Why do angels fly in the sky? Why can't hell be in the sky and heaven in the earth? And so that notion of which we're going to have in the discussions of making earth as a heaven as well as the sky. I love the notion of having badger angels burrowing through the earth and so on. Look at the disaster of our school hymn. There it is. Glad that I live among. I always failed at this one anyway. I always thought I was a failure. Sky is blue, glad for the country. After the sun, the rain. Well, this is very true. The rain, the sun. All that we need to do, be we low or high, is to see that we grow nearer the sky. Well, I was always short, so that was a disaster. I'd always failed on that one. But I mean, we're not. All that we need to do, be we low or high, so neither we grow into the earth. You can see how that was foisted upon many a school child of my generations. And what a disastrous piece of theology it is. And there we're looking at the hymns, and that's where we're renewing the liturgy by changing and looking at the hymns that we actually sing in some way, and the way that they influence us here, giving you some examples for a community church which is interested in keeping the earth within the theology. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, where are you in the sky song? In the forest sounds your cry. What to give you, what to call you, what am I, and so on. And of course, the model of the Trinity is not some abstraction, but it is actually of the dancing at the heart of the universe. The hope goes round. This is sung to Greensleeves. Hope goes round and the strength goes round. The power goes round, the love goes round. And three are one in a circling dance. It embraces the growing of God. Yeah. So the notion of including the earth in that dance, and that dance is going on in the earth as well as in the sky. And I revised a hymn that's been very popular and wish I'd written it this way in the first place, but my own thinking has changed. We sing a love that sets all people free, that blows in wind, that burns in scorching flame, enfolds in earth, springs up in water clear, and so on. The original I wrote was that blows like wind, burns like scorching flame. I was wrong. And since then I've learnt the error of my ways. And that verse is still quite often changed because a lot of the church don't even like that blows like wind. They're very worried of panpsychism and so on, because it denies the way in which theology has been framed. Doug writing, warm God of seeds, all nature's secret source, womb of earth maker, the notion of the earth being the womb of God. Walk softly on the earth, massage it with your feet. Going outside, as many of the sort of forest churches do, going outside with bare feet, walking on the earth with bare feet. I often say to the earth when I walk in the mornings on it barefoot, oh, you're not making it easy today, are you? You're very hard and you're pricking my feet a lot. And when it's a bit wetter, oh, this is nice, thank you. So a bit like Jane has said, talking to the earth, saying thank you, or saying when it's difficult to negotiate, and so on. So having a service outside and getting people to walk on some of the grass and feel it, as God's grandeur says, our feet don't feel anymore because we wear shoes all the time, but once in a while, letting our feet be part of the earth. And then I rewrote Golden Sheaves, keeping some of the past, but bringing the present into it. So we've got to thee, O Lord, our hearts we raise. Don't like the raise, but I left it there. But then second verse, we gaze into your fertile earth and see your creatures working. Regeneration in the dirt, the Holy Spirit birthing. The soil is the human ground, society's foundation. The dark of God, a fire profound, the basis of creation. We long for right relationship enfleshed in earthy greening, with animals and shining fish, and lightning and darkening. Compassion lives with human hearts, for peace and justice searching, requiring all your skillful arts for heavening and earthing. I like earthing. And I'm not going to share all of these with you. But look how marvelous the earth is at resurrection. You see all these ruins? When the buildings start falling down, the earth takes it right over. I drive on one road to Winchester, the old road. There was a hotel on it once when I first went to Winchester in 89. Now, when you go past the field, there is no indication that there was ever a hotel there. It's completely grown over. The earth has reclaimed it, taken it back to itself. So the vibrancy and the notion of resurrection, as you see here, new life from the ruins. And here's Mary Oliver, which, I think I use a great deal in the services as poems and so on, give the congregation to take away with them. I don't want you just to sit down at the table. I don't want you to just eat and be content. I want you to walk out in the fields where the water is shining and the rice has risen. I want you to stand there far from this white tablecloth. I want you to fill your hands with mud like a blessing. And this is a song, I haven't had the courage to put it in my local church, but it has been sung various meetings. Sing a song of whirling worms deep within a mud-soaked soil, wellspring of our verdant sea, processing with endless toil. Tell your stories, crawling ones, circling around the roots and rocks as you green the land above. Hidden wisdom is unlocked. And then you've got ancient healing cavern pools, underworld of dark dust and dirt, turn detritus into gold, substance of the bear and lark.
Sure.
In the tunneling of God's grace, we are rooted deep in earth. Smear us with your dirt and grit, for in darkening, God gives birth. So heaven and hell are the words that we used to think of other realms, heaven above and hell below. How do we think of other realms now?
Thank you, June. Thank you very much. Yes, we've gone over a little bit.
Sorry.
We may just go over 12:30 for another 5 minutes or so, if that's all right with everybody. So we're going to go into conscious conversations again in the breakout room. So the question is, how really do we think of other realms now? How do we think of other realms now? So, Bill, if we stay in the breakout rooms until 20 past, gives us another 5 minutes than we'd planned. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. I think we're all back in place again. We're going to have a short whole group session, really, to see if anyone's got things that they would like to raise. It might be easiest, Bill, if we just can see everybody in the gallery view. And if anybody would like to ask June a question or make a comment, then please do. I think easiest to wave your hand. I think we can see everybody on the screen.
June made me remember Original Blessings by Matthew Fox, which contains an awful lot of what she's been, references to the sort of things she's been saying.
Yes, it was a seminal book, wasn't it?
Yes.
Original Blessing. Yeah.
And it was based on one of the Hildegard images, which is of the fall.
Oh, really?
Where she's, it looks as if a human being's falling into a pit, but underneath it's a garden that they're in. So
Yes.
that particular image is one of Hildegard's vision that he was basing Original Blessing on. And of course, there's very little crucifixion there's only one slide of the crucifixion at all in one image of the crucifixion. So, whereas later mystics like Julian of Norwich is centered on the crucifixion, whereas this crucifixion is just part of a narrative rather than the central point. The central point is this notion of a cosmology infused totally with the divine spirit.
Can you tell us a bit more about the Hildegard Society?
Well, I haven't got it anymore. It got fused into what I run now, which is music, spirituality, and well-being.
Oh, right.
Which is, we've got a subscription of about 500 people from 4 continents who are involved in well-being in the sort of Hildegardian way, and spirituality, embracing spirituality, which wasn't embraced by academe. So we've the latest book we're doing is music. We've got the call for chapters out on music, death and dying in a crisis-driven world, which is being co-edited by in UK and in Jerusalem. The person in Jerusalem is looking at where music is being used to bring people together in Jerusalem, in that particular. There, the ones we've got 2 books on autoethnography showing how it's easiest to get it in where people are telling their stories and what the importance of that their spirituality is gained through music making, and looking much more at spiritual but not religious, as well as spiritual and religious. So embracing those two and embracing a range of faiths. So we've got an Islamic member, and we've got a Buddhist member, and obviously a Jerusalem Jewish member, and then we've got people who would call themselves atheists but want to call themselves as spiritual atheists, and so on. So if you just go into MSW International on there, you can just, it's free, you can just join the mailing list, and the mailing comes out. And I think the next conference we're doing is on death and dying, and trauma and music and trauma and the spirituality of trauma. We're doing that in September in association with Jerusalem, and so on. So the Hildegard notion of sort of morphed into that, and many of the people, because when we started the Hildegard Society, she was virtually unknown, and that was started back in the 1980s. Now, of course, she's relatively well known. And when I went to Bingen, even people in Bingen didn't know much about Hildegard, so let alone the rest of the world. So somebody asked early on, why did we not keep them alive? But then you look at, the very patriarchal male models of God actually affirmed patriarchy. And therefore the women got lost and the men got praised. So Bernard of Clairvaux was very well known, but Hildegard in conversation with him isn't. And interestingly, Bernard of Clairvaux, she wrote him saying, would she have, in a sense, could she get affirmation of the visions? And Bernard showed very little interest initially until the Pope affirmed her. Then suddenly she got more of the... So the story of women saints is not the same as the men. They have to struggle much more. And she's only just been made a saint. She was a saint in Germany because of you can be saint by local recognition, which is why we've got all the saints in Cornwall and things like this that nobody else knows much about. But she was made a doctor of the church about 3 years ago, or maybe it was longer than that. But and she was put forward for sainthood about 3 times and failed. So,
any others with hands up? Jonathan.
Lovely to see you.
You're muted, Jonathan. Have to unmute yourself.
Unmute, Jonathan, please.
No, two places. June, as a wonderful tour de force. Thank you so much. There's so much in that I would like to have recorded and to be able to use at times. I'd love to nominate you to the next Archbishop of Canterbury, but you won't want it, I guess. But I think what you have shared with us today is prophetic, and I hope it feeds into the mainstream of where so many of us are. Thank you.
Well, it's slowly, isn't it? And that's Jane has quite remarked that I've stayed an Anglican priest, and Jonathan, only just sometimes. But it does give you a chance gently to introduce these ideas bit by bit, and so on. And it's a privilege really to be able to talk for 10 minutes or so on a Sunday morning to a very varied congregation in South London, and how many of them will embrace these ideas if they're talked about and so on.
Yeah.
And I think that one gives that up, you're giving up an immense opportunity, because it only works by gently putting the ideas in one by one.
Yes, so I think the sort of ordinary Christians are very often very open to these ideas, and it's the hierarchy of the church and the theology of the church which is holding it all back, because it's all stuck in Middle Ages theology, really.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is, I think that people saw me when I was going to be ordained as being a fairly radical theologian, and nobody would understand it. But you're absolutely right. When I preach, people say, "Do you really believe that?" I said, "Well, yes, I just said it." And they say, "John, I've been thinking for that for years, and I thought it was wrong." I said, "Well, it's right, so you carry on thinking it."
Amen.
Okay, Carol, the final.
Yeah, just very quick, June. I just, from what you're saying and thinking, has the BBC contacted you? Because that's a wonderful way of maybe, having an opportunity more, and including, bringing forward women saints, but also everything you do on a Sunday morning in your church, in a service or something, some way. I'm surprised I haven't come across you more, or in the BBC radio at least.
I think the BBC is a very curious phenomenon, really. It's very much in the hierarchy, and it's still quite suspicious of spirituality or religion. One of the saddest things I heard during COVID was a man telling the story of being on a life support machine and had a vision of Jesus being in a boat with Jesus and sailing through it safely. And, Nick Robinson, as it swings back into the program, says something like, "Well, the drugs give you curious experiences, don't they?" So that isn't likely to be in favor of listening to women visionaries, and so on. And I think it's still much more materialist than the wider world is, and so on. And also, I don't hold any significant position in the church. And again, that notion of still a church which is heavily controlled by men, and where men are regarded as the authority. Although all my life I've worked in that, it hasn't changed a great deal, really. And so I think it is very difficult to be accepted as somebody that people might want to hear. In a sense, I did long for it earlier on in my life, but now I think one does what one can do in the particular situation, with the particular of this part of this wonderful earth, where one can say something slightly different, and leave the rest to God, I think, as to how far it penetrates, and so on and so forth. Certainly MSW International has been a huge blessing, because we've turned out 19 books altogether. Often anthologies from all over the world, showing different aspects, Buddhist and Christian, and all sorts of aspects. And so my church in London is in Tooting, and it's near Tooting Bec Underground Station. If you look at All Saints Tooting, SW17, you will see the map. It's about 5 minutes walk from Tooting Bec Underground Station. So, but I shan't be there tomorrow, because I should be in Cambridge.
Just to say that this has been recorded, Jonathan. This has been recorded, so everybody who's present will be sent a recording of it.
That's great. Thank you.
Good. Okay, we better
MSW. Sorry, Judy. It's MSW International.
Oh yeah.
MSW International. Website. So I'd love to welcome you there. And if any of you've got anything to share as a chapter, we not only have academic chapters with references and all that, but we have what are called interludes, where you can write of singing to the dying, or a funeral that was wonderful with wonderful music. Do look at the MSW, the call, and it will be lovely. We're lovely to welcome you. And can I say thank you for inviting me today? It's been a great privilege. And thank you for the questions and the interest in it all. I'm very, very grateful to you. And thank you, Bill, for managing me electronically.
Thank you. I'm going to just move to our closing intention now, and Jane's just going to
we need to change it. Can you change it?
Not immediately, no.
Okay.
Well, you say what you want it to be.
Okay. I think really that this should be in us. Oh, it should be that we might be aware, awake, and alive to our strand in the web of life and spirit in earth. We've left out spirit, we've left put on instead of in.
Say that again, Jane.
So after strand, put and spirit.
So that we might be aware, awake, and alive to our strand and spirit.
Oh no, sorry. Sorry. Our strand in the sorry, it's after life. Our strand in the web of life and spirit in earth, not on earth.
Yes, it should be in earth.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
okay.
So anyway, what we do at the end of these is just because we've got this wonderful group dynamic together, let us use it to hold this as an intention that we might be aware, awake, and alive to our strand in the web of life and spirit in earth. Let's just hold that together for a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, thank you, everyone. And a special, huge thank you to June. Thank you so much for such a rich input and for stimulating us in so many ways. We're so appreciative of you joining us. And maybe some of you who live a bit nearer can get to Tooting and see her live, which would be nice.
Are we going to have Jenny blow the candle out for us?
Yeah, Jenny, I'm going to hand over to you to finish and blow the candle out for us.
Would that be zoomed as well? Those, no.
Ready for the candle?
Yes.
So, dear friends, we close our gathering with thankfulness and gratitude for all that we have heard, all that we have shared, and all we have co-created in our conversation today. As the candle is blown out, we breathe in the light of peace, wisdom, and compassion, and may the light shine in us, with us, and through us.
Amen.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, friends.
So thank you all. Our next conscious conversation, I think, is in October, October the 4th. And Bill, of course, will be sending more information out about that nearer the time. But in the meantime, if we don't see you over the summer, have a good summer.
Say that our Cana Online Sacred Space for Beltane is next Wednesday morning. So let Bill know if you would like to join us then.
Yes, that's right. Sorry, next Wednesday morning, Cana Online Sacred Space for Beltane.
Yeah,
so,
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock, yes. Super. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
And again,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.